Um, I won't spend too much time on this sheet. I'll allow you guys to take a look, but it really maps out and explains exactly the type of chaos that we are looking at if this bill passes. I want to spend more time on telling you about myself. I'm a mom of four. I was raised in a middle class family. My parents didn't have a lot, but they did the best they could. My little brother was hit by a car when he was 3. My mom came down with a neurological disease when I was 11 and became wheelchair bound and died 16 years later. I worked my entire life. My first job was when I was 12. Life happened to me. I owned a house, I owned a business, I was doing well. And then everything flipped upside down and I ended up homeless with my kids. Public housing pulled me out of that. After a year and a half of living in my car and going in between hotels when I could, I finally had some stability. Less than a year later, I was wrongfully evicted from public housing. Thankfully, there was an appeals process, and I won my appeal and I stayed in my unit. I would have been back on the street because the property manager at the time decided to break the contract, decided to break the rules, decided to add $1,200 in unauthorized pet fees for a pet that was on the lease and take my rent payments and put it towards those fees and then evict me for non-payment of rent. I was one of the lucky few that actually got to fight that. By taking away people's rights to present their side, it's taking the word of a landowner over everyone. Just because you own property does not make you a person of honor and integrity. As an advocate, I work with tenants every day that go through the worst possible conditions you can ever think of in your life. It's heartbreaking. And to see the way that some landlords treat their tenants is disgusting. On the other hand, I've seen some really amazing landlords that care about their tenants, that work with them, that do everything they can to help them. Those are the type of landlords that everyone needs. Have you ever seen a writ of possession executed? Because I have. I've watched the police drag a woman and her 3 small children from their beds at 8 o'clock in the morning. I watched as every single item she owned, was thrown out in the street. And then I watched as cars stopped and picked through her items with her sitting on the ground. That is violent. And it's not okay. And now you want to let landlords do it freely. That's just ridiculous. You can't put this through. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am a renter, chronically homeless, and I used to answer the eviction hotline for a local legal aid agency, TRLA. I used to hear other people's stories in mass numbers. I would average out 30 intakes a week before they told me to slow down. And I would average out about 200, 300, 400 people that I had talked to. Your back and forth earlier today debating confirms that you are trying to actually evict renters like me, not just squatters. There is a difference between a squatter and a renter. It sounds like all of you are actually more upset with the constitutional right, fundamental constitutional right of all citizens who have the right to appeals process. I've spoken with tenants who experience abuse after abuse by some landlords and apartment associations, specifically TAA. I have seen time and time again common practices where landlords abuse tenants by not giving a written and giving verbal leases, or prematurely moving voucher tenants into units they are not supposed to. And when the housing authority processing doesn't fall through, it is the landlord's fault for prematurely moving such tenant into a unit that they weren't even supposed to. It's not the tenant's fault. Please understand the difference between squatters and renters who struggle to stay housed. I myself used to be both a time or two in my life. I've never been proud of those times when I successfully entered in an abandoned unit, but I had to do what I had to do to keep myself safe. So I'm sorry if I infringed on anybody's property rights, but I had to keep myself safe as a single woman, homeless on the streets. I did do the best I could, and I left $1 or $2 wherever the owner of the place could find it to thank him for letting me sleep, okay? Rather than seeking retribution, I know we live in Texas, guns, shootouts, whatever. Rather than seeking retribution against squatters, why don't you just help me motivate local governments to stop selling out to developers like Weston Graham's or Randy Smith's or the Jeff Trifts of the world, and begin to invest in more public housing, public spaces to provide a place or a shelter to allow squatters to stay. Practice compassion, not retribution. I know it's a hard concept for Texas, but it's easy. You are eliminating core fundamental American rights to the civil judicial process. I am a renter, not a criminal. And even if I'm a month behind on rent, I'm still not a criminal. So I would appreciate if you don't treat me like a criminal. This bill, as it is currently written, will increase homelessness in Texas because of the way it treats renters as squatters. I'm almost done. A squatter forcibly enters into a property while renters obtain possession of a property through a lease contract, written or verbal. That is binding not only for me, but for the landlord. Last words. This bill is unjust move to swiftly eliminate rights of a renter away and remove renters and allow landlords to escape the requirements of due process. Practice compassion, not retribution.
I'm speaking today as someone who's experienced homelessness. It's been several times in my life. I was in foster care and dropped right into homelessness at 18, and I don't have any backup. I know the struggle and the fear and the feeling of being completely lost that you have when you lose your home, when you lose your support system. It doesn't start when you hit the streets. It starts as soon as you find out something's going to happen to your home, to your job. One of the biggest disconnects I'm seeing with people is the talk of people not wanting to pay their rent or falling behind for whatever reason. Oftentimes this will happen from just one little illness. It could happen from being 1 minute late. Your job has a right to fire you for that. You could lose your job over the tiniest little thing, and that takes away your stability. You run into a situation where you're trying to pay your bills and you don't have a backup. It takes a long time to find a job in this state right now. We run into times like you apply for unemployment. It takes a month for that to happen. In that time, you could lose your work. You could lose your home as well. This bill creates even more of a divide between tenants and landowners and the property developers. These are the kinds of conversations that we need to be having. Tenants, politicians, advocates, and the apartment owners all need to be in conversation together. This sort of thing doesn't work without everybody working together to find a plan that works for everybody. This bill makes it even harder for people like me to get back on our feet with how long it takes already from homelessness. It took me almost 2.5 years to go from being dropped from state custody to finding a place that I could get on my own. And that was when I was younger. It's even harder now. It's even harder in Texas than it was where I was. It's going to deprive tenants of our rights to a hearing, everything everybody has talked about. All it does is harms the tenants and benefits the landowner. Nothing protects anybody from homelessness. This homelessness epidemic that is facing this country is massive, and this is going to make it so much worse. So many people in Texas are 1 minute, 1 day, 1 hour away from losing their home. You move into an apartment and they claim like 30%, whatever, but that doesn't count the extra $150 in fees that they tack on in the end, and all the other things that are going to add up. Everybody is paying more than they can afford to pay rent in Texas, and this is just going to be a bigger problem with this bill. I know that it's hard to talk about homelessness for people. I don't know why. It's hard to really look at the issue, but this is going to cause a massive problem. There's going to be tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Texans losing their homes. Thank you.
Good afternoon, committee. I'm here, representatives. I'm here to stand here before you, not just for myself, but my fellow veterans, those who cannot speak for themselves, those who may not even know what the House Bill 32 can do until it's too late or if it's passed. We serve this country, but not on our own rights. Our own rights are under attack. House Bill 32 makes it easier, faster, and cheaper for forced veterans and disabled individuals and families out of their homes without trial, without due process, and without justice. This bill allows landlords to evict tenants without a trial, pick courts that favor them, win by default if the tenant misses a response deadline, win without proof if they even got notified, ignore the disabilities and hardships of financial barriers. For veterans like for veterans like me, this is a nightmare. Many have struggled with PTSD like myself, disabilities, and rely on fixed incomes like the VA benefits, and we know all those are under attack right now with the current administration. This bill hands landlords an unchecked power to evict us with little or no notice. This evidence is no real chance for us to fight back. House Bill 32 violates due process and harms disabled vets. A veteran who misses a deadline by a single day could lose their homes or without a hearing. A disabled vet with PTSD could be forced to be into a remote hearing without proper accommodations. A veteran on a fixed income could be evicted just for not being able to pay the upfront appeal process. This violates the 14th Amendment. This violates the American Disabilities Act. This violates the basic human decency. Now let's talk about an unfair and unreachable appeal process. For those who try to fight back, House Bill 32 makes it nearly impossible to appeal. The tenants must pay 1 month's rent up front just to file an appeal, even if the eviction order was wrongful. The appeal process confuses and discourages designs to push tenants in giving up. Oh, I want to give up. By the time the tenants receive notice of their eviction, it's often too late to challenge it. If this justice looks like, then we have failed, and those who have served this country. And failing is neglect. We know the cost of neglect for veterans. We know that 22 veterans a day take their own lives. Let that sink in. 22 veterans take their own lives a day. Many of those deaths are tied into homelessness, financial hardship, and loss of dignity. House Bill 32 increases evictions, increases homelessness, and increases the veterans' suicides. When it happens, I ask every lawmaker who supports this bill, was streamlining evictions worth their lives? We demand change, amend House Bill 33 before veterans suffer. We're not asking for special treatment. We're asking for demand of fair treatment. Require proper notice and fair trial before an eviction, ensure disabilities and accommodations for veterans, eliminate financial barriers to appeal, and stop evictions before appeals are resolved. Veterans answered the call when our nation needed us. Now I'm calling on our leaders that stand before us not to abandon us. This is not about politics. This is about justice. This is about dignity, and this is about ensuring that no veteran or person is left out in the cold because of a broken system designed to fail them. We deserve better as veterans, and we deserve better as Americans. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for your testimony and for your service as well.